Welcome everyone to this video on using our digital multimeter to measure resistances or use it as what is called an ohm meter. So on our multimeter, we are able to measure resistances in the range of all the way from 0 ohms at the 0 to 200 ohms, all the way up until this 200 mega ohms. So we can actually measure a pretty wide range of resistors. Now, on our board, unfortunately, the resistors, they're just too small to be able to accurately get in and take a resistance measurement with these probes. They're too big, these hand probes, to actually measure those very small surface components. And I will show later in the course one way that we can take measurements on these small surface mount components, but we're going to need some different equipment. For this lesson, just to demonstrate, I do have 2 bags of resistors here that I will show on how we can measure. All right, so the first one I've got here is we have a 680 ohm bag of resistors, and you see they have 1/4 watt rating, and they're guaranteed to be within this 5%. So we can double check and make sure they are actually at 680 ohms or within that 5%. Alrighty, so I'm gonna set the multimeter to the 200. We'll go up to the 2000 ohm setting, and that should give us a good reading. All right, and on these leads, you can see there's actually a little ledge, and the resistor leads just fit nicely into that little ledge. So I'm just gonna fit mine in here. All right, and if I move my hand out of the way, so we can see that this resistor is measuring at 672 ohms. So we are about 8 ohms off of what the baggie is saying, but that's okay because we're within that 5%. All right, and I've got another bag here that I'm just gonna pop open. Okay, and this one actually I'll just show first. So this one's at 6.2 kilo ohms, again 1/4 watt and 5% tolerance. So same thing, I'm just going to put it into the ledge here that is on these leads, and we can just hold it in place. All right, and you'll notice when I do this one, so on our multimeter, we are just reading 1. And the reason for that is this is a 6.2 kilo ohm resistor, and we're just in this up to 2000 range, so we're over that range. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch it to this 20K range, and then we should be able to take our measurement. All right, and if we hold it here, just going to make sure I'm holding it tight to get a good reading. Okay, so we can see that this one's actually off by quite a bit. So we're at hovering around 6.03 kilo ohms when it's supposed to be a 6.2 kilo ohm resistor. So we're still within that 5%, but just wanted to show how these can vary off by a little bit. Okay, so if you don't have any of these resistors at home, that's okay, I don't expect you to. But if you do want to make a measurement with your digital multimeter to check some resistances, then one thing we can do is we can actually measure the resistance between our hands through our body. We were chatting about in the safety lesson how our bodies actually have quite a high resistance, and I just want to show you how you can make that measurement. So I'm not entirely sure what mine are, but I'm expecting I have dry hands and I do have some calluses on my fingers. So I'm going to start at the highest reading at 200 mega ohms, and if we have to, we can move down from there. So I'm just going to switch mine to this 200 mega ohms. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the probes pretty tightly here, and we'll see what it goes to. All right, so mine is going to this 1.3, and we know that's in mega ohms, so that's 1.3 mega ohms. So that's the resistance through my body right now, which is pretty cool that we can measure it as that 1.3 mega ohms. I'm just going to lick my fingers here and see how that changes the resistance. Okay, so I just licked my fingers to get them a little bit wet, and we can see that even already that's bringing down the resistance value a bit. And if I got them even wetter, then we would be able to bring that resistance down even more. So kind of cool to see that. On our board, unfortunately, as I mentioned before, it is too hard to measure the resistance values with these probes. There is some value to taking resistance measurements on the board sometimes if we're trying to do reverse engineering and figure out what value resistors are, or if we're trying to match a schematic to a board that doesn't have good markings on it, we can kind of identify the areas of the board by looking at the resistance. If you are making resistance measurements on a board and the resistors are big enough you can probe it, it's best practice to take resistance measurements with the board powered off, because that way the current that's running through the circuit will not throw off your resistance measurements. Of course, the way that this guy takes resistance measurements is it actually uses a low voltage itself, and then based on the amount of current that's able to flow, it's able to tell the resistance. So we don't want to throw that off by having the board have its own current going through it. And also just good safety practice to have it off. That wraps up this lesson on using the multimeter as an ohm meter or to measure resistance. I'll see you over in the next video.